This is the mission history for the second week of August presented by Pastor James Huang. Today, we're diving into the incredible life of D.A. Bunker, an American whose story became, well, completely woven into the fabric of modern Korea. So let's get into it. Our story starts with a man named Delzell Adelbert Bunker, D.A. Bunker. He was an educator who answered a call from the kingdom of Joseon, right when it was just starting to open up to the rest of the world. Okay, so what set all this in motion? Well, it really kicks off after an 1882 treaty between Joseon and the United States. This brand new relationship got Joseon's leaders thinking. They decided to set up their very first modern, state-run school. It was called Yukyong-gangwon. And the mission? Super clear. Teach English and Western sciences to the kids of the nobility. But to do that, they needed American teachers. And that's where D.A. Bunker comes in. He was born back in 1853, and he'd just graduated from the really well-known Union Theological Seminary when this request came through. So he, along with two other young guys, Gilmore and Hulbert, got the recommendation. And can you believe it? They landed on Korean soil on July 4th, 1886. Talk about stepping into a completely different world. And man, what a chapter that turned out to be. Bunker's job was supposed to be just a teacher, right? But that role, it expanded fast. He quickly became this really central figure in building modern Korean education for decades to come. So he starts his career at Yukyong-gangwon, and he's there for a solid 8 years before the school eventually had to close its doors. But his mission in Korea, it was far from over. He just moved over to Paichai Hakdong, which was run by the Methodist mission, and kept right on teaching. And his role there just got bigger and bigger. You see, after the really tragic death of the school's founder, Henry Appenzeller, back in 1902, Bunker he stepped up. He took on the role of principal at Paichai Hakdong and served there until 1911, just pouring everything he had into helping that school grow. And you know what? All this hard work, it didn't go unnoticed. Not at all. In fact, the highest levels of government were paying attention. In 1892, the Joseon court actually awarded him the rank of Jung Thripum Dungsungkwan for everything he'd done for education. Now, to put that in perspective for you, this was a senior government position. I mean, think about that. It was a huge honor that basically put a foreign teacher right up there with the kingdom's top officials. But Bunker was more than just a typical academic. The guy had a real love for music. And in 1896, he got to play this really unique part in a huge historic moment. At the dedication of the Independence Gate, he is the one who taught the students how to sing what many consider Korea's very first national anthem. The lyrics were by Yoon Chi-ho, and they set it to a Scottish folk tune. I mean, can you imagine being there for that? Just incredible. Okay, but Bunker's influence went way, way beyond the classroom. And this is where the story gets really intense. Because we're talking about one of the most turbulent and honestly dangerous times in all of Korean history. So in 1895, the whole nation was just plunged into chaos and fear. Why? Because of the absolutely brutal assassination of Queen Min. Her husband, Emperor Gojong, was left completely vulnerable, terrified for his own life, even inside the palace walls. And this is where Bunker's role takes a truly extraordinary turn. He and a few other missionaries decided they had to do something. So they stepped in to act as the emperor's personal bodyguards. Seriously. Along with his colleagues, Gale, Underwood, and Avison, he would take turns staying inside the palace. The thinking was that their presence as foreigners might just be enough to stop another attack. And his commitment to the Korean people didn't just stop at the palace gates. Not even close. He also became this powerful voice and advocate for some of the key figures in the independence movement who'd been thrown in prison for their political work. He actually got official permission to make regular visits to the prison, where he would offer comfort and support. And listen, the men he was visiting weren't just anybody. These were foundational figures of modern Korea. We're talking about people like Lee Sung-jae, Nam Gung-eok, and even a young Syngman Rhee, who, as you know, would later become South Korea's very first president. Bunker's support was absolutely invaluable, and he was constantly working to try and get them released. So what was driving all of this? His teaching, his advocacy, his willingness to protect the emperor? Well, underneath it all was a really deep and active Christian faith. That was the compass that guided everything he did. And this wasn't just some private belief he kept to himself. No, he put it into action. In 1896, he started doing pastoral work at Dongdaemun Church. Then, in 1905, he helped put together a council to try and bring more unity between all the different Protestant missions in Korea. And by 1908, he was leading the American Bible Society in Korea, making sure the scriptures were getting out to as many people as possible. So, after this entire lifetime of service, we get to Bunker's final chapter. And it's a chapter that really shows you just how deeply connected he felt to this nation, the nation that had truly become his home. He officially retired on July 4th, 1926. And get this, that was exactly 40 years to the day after he first set foot in Korea. He went back to the United States with his wife, and he passed away in California a few years later, in 1932. He was 80 years old. But was that the end of his story with Korea? Him passing away in America? No way. Not even close. You see, in his will, Bunker made one final, very specific request. After spending 4 decades of his life there, he couldn't imagine being laid to rest anywhere else. He asked to be buried in the soil of Korea, and his wife made sure that wish came true. In 1933, she made that long journey all the way back across the Pacific, carrying his ashes with her. They held a final farewell service, and D.A. Bunker was laid to rest at the Yangwajin Foreign Missionary Cemetery in Seoul. He was, forever, a part of the land he loved so much. If you go to his tombstone, the inscription on it, it just perfectly sums up his entire life of faith and service. It reads, "Until the day dawns the shadows free away." What a powerful testament, right? To a life spent bringing light and education to a nation that was just waiting for its new day to dawn. The story we shared today comes from Pastor James Hwang. He's a researcher of Korean mission history who served as a missionary to China and is now based in Maryland, USA. He shares these stories every week from his book, which is called Remember and Repay 52-Week Mission Meditations.